Well, good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to First Parish Unitarian Universalist in Midfield, and a special thank you and welcome to all of you streaming in from home as well. This congregation first gathered in 1651, and this historic meeting house where we worship this morning was built in 1789 on the unceded ancestral lands of the Nipmuc. Well, friends, welcome. Welcome to this place. Here we honor the inherent dignity and worthiness found in everyone. Here we gather together each week in covenant and in community to remind ourselves that we are good, we are loved, that we could all use a little work, and that we are in this together. So whoever you are, wherever you come from, whatever you believe, whomever you love, we welcome you to this congregation.
The Persistent Flame by Amy Brooks. Even as the days grow shorter and our homes shrink smaller and our wicks burn lower and our will to endure flickers, we light this chalice to kindle a flame of warmth as a reminder of the connection that draws us in to a community that opens us up, in gratitude for the breath in our lungs and the love in our hearts for the gift of this day alive.
Frozen earth holds the determined seed. The sacred space holds our weariness, our worry, our laughter, and our celebration. Let us bring seed and soul into the light of thought, the warmth of this community, and the hope of love. Let us see together, hear together, love together. Let us worship together. I'd invite forward Becca Cornett to light our menorah.
Good morning. So tonight will be the fourth night of Hanukkah,
And Rev Dave has asked me to light the menorah. As many of you know, the Hanukkah holiday is celebrated and the menorah is lit just after sundown. And so we normally wouldn't light candles in the middle of the day, but we love to bring this into the service for people who don't get to see this. So tonight would be the fourth night, so I'm going to light 4 candles, and I'm going to sing the blessings. There are 3 blessings that are sung generally in the first night, and then we usually continue on only with 2, but we always like to sing all 3, so I'm going to do all 3. And let me just give you the translation, and then I'll do them. The first blessing is, and this is kind of old-fashioned language, but it's the one I have in my head from my history, so. Blessed art thou, Lord our God, King of the universe, who hallows us with mitzvot, which are good deeds, commanding us to kindle the Hanukkah lights. Amen. Second one, blessed art thou, Lord our God, King of the universe, who performed wondrous deeds for our ancestors in days of old at this season. Amen. And the last one, this is the one that we normally only sing on the first night, but we sing, I think, at every Jewish holiday, because you'll see it doesn't have anything to do with Hanukkah. It's a more general blessing. Blessed art thou, Lord our God, King of the universe, who has kept us alive, sustained us, and brought us to this season. Amen. So feel free to sing along if you know. And this is a beautiful menorah donated by Louise and Duncan, and actually her candles that she gave me last night because she was horrified at the nasty-looking Hanukkah candles I was using in my house. I'm not even kidding. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Hanukkah. Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, she'asa nisi lavoseinu bayomim hohem b'azman hazeh. Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, she'hechianu v'kiyamanu v'higianu lazman hazeh. Amen.
All right, now let's rise in body or in spirit for our opening hymn, Light One Candle. It's number 221 in your great hymnal.
Light one candle for the faintly
quiet our minds and hearts now as we enter into a time of silent meditation. A moment to connect with your breath. Breathe in, breathe out. This morning, we holding on to so much. As much as we might try, we not let go of the pain that's happening in our world right now. Pray for peace to somehow find its way into Israel and Palestine. There's been so much bloodshed, so many injured, so many killed. Pray that those in positions of power have the wisdom. Know that it is time to stop the killing. Children, all of the children, they do not deserve to be killed in this conflict. Words can't even express the pain and the trauma that continue right now, this very day. Pray for all of those who are suffering in Ukraine. Pray for all of the victims of gun violence continues here in this country. As much as we want to turn away from the horrific news, enjoy the holidays, can't help but be heartbroken. Let's take a few moments in silence as we hold all of this in our hearts. Kay Bennett to share with us the morning story.
Blessed by Brokenness by the Reverend Susan Van Drieser. You may not know it, but there was a time when all fir trees were perfect. Pine trees, spruce trees, balsams, tamaracks, cedars, and hemlocks. From the time they were seedlings in the soil, from the moment they emerged as tiny cotyledons, their parent trees, their aunts and uncles and grandparent trees, coached them with gentle, windy whispers. Ho, they would say, reach toward the sun straight up above you. She will make you warm. Hiya, hey, they would rumble. Dig deep your roots and spread them wider, for they will hold you strong and feed you. Ayaha, they sang, spread your branches wide and keep your needles soft, that the wind may pass through without harm. And the tiny trees, the tiny, tiny seedlings, would hearken to these voices and strive as much as small cells can to grow tall and deep, dreaming of the day their whispers would deepen in the forested world. All trees wanted to grow perfectly, for that is how they could best fulfill their promise. They made the soil and sheltered tiny, invisible creatures in their roots and branches. They fed the air and made the wind fresh. They gave the animals shade and fed the ground their needles and seeds. And all the while they whispered to themselves of the queen, who would come to choose one of them to grace her halls for the solstice celebration. Each forest, each hill, each grove worked toward that day, toward the fame that would make them the honored ones. In one forest, all the trees worked together toward that day. Many of the trees had grown too old to offer their branches to the queen. Others, no matter how hard they tried, would never be big enough to suit her purposes. But one tree among them became their hope, just the right age and height and girth, perfect in all dimensions, symmetrical and elegant. This tree became the promise of the forest. Stretch, breathed the elders to her. Reach from the top. Drink deep, called others. As the queen's choosing day came closer, the elders called out more advice, and the younger ones cheered, "You are the best." The forest knew by the length of the day and the night that tomorrow would be the choosing day. All day they rested quietly, watching across the broad valley for a glimpse of the queen's entourage. But all they saw was a great wind sweeping down out of the north. As it dashed across the lakes, it picked up moisture and flung before it cold, biting flecks of snow. The forest moaned as it stood strong against the winds. Snow gathered on the branches and weighed them down. One large slide of snow barely missed a young fawn, separated from its mother, blundering on unsteady legs in the wind. The favorite tree spread her branches and guided the fawn beneath its shelter, then closed round it again. When the morning finally dawned, after the night of great wind, the forest felt very still. Most of the trees remained shrouded in snow, their branches low. With the wisdom of their species, they had survived the night. As the sun rose and the warm snow slid to the ground in great powdery whooshes, the trees stretched their branches and saluted the sun. When the snow slid from its branches, the favorite tree stretched gingerly. From its upper branches, the wren flew, warmed and rested to find its clan. When the snow slid from the tree's lower branches with a great thump, a startled rabbit burst through its shelter and into the underbrush, leaving a great rent in her lower limbs. Sensing its mother's approach, the fawn rose and pushed its way through the tree's limbs, bending a few of the branches and leaving one dangling. The favorite tree stretched some more. It felt strangely achy and bruised. Then it shook the remaining snow from its branches, and the forest moaned once again, for the perfect tree was no longer perfect. The forest stood in mourning, not least the once favored tree. Not one tree said a thing, but the once favored tree knew it had let the forest down. It had forgotten its treeness in its desire to help the animals. The queen would never choose it. So lost in mourning was the forest that it did not watch for the queen's arrival. It did not hear the swoosh of her sledge or the jingle of the horse's harness until she alighted among them, turning her critical eye this way and that. She walked swiftly among the trees, past the once favored tree and onward, and then turned and cast her gaze upon it once again. She saw the tree's wounds at once, but now she saw the small feathers caught on the upper needles and the footprints of the rabbit and the fox circling the tree. Kneeling down, she saw the soft outline of the fawn where it had slept next to the tree's trunk. "This one," she called to her astonished attendants. They obeyed and raised their axes. The favored tree had just a moment to bow in thanks to its forest before lying down in the woodcutter's arms for its journey to the great hall. There the people decorated it and danced around it. They declared it the most beautiful tree ever chosen by the queen. And as they mused upon it, some saw in its gnarled and misshapen branches the loving arm of a father, or the cradling arms of a mother, or the many arms of families and friends outstretched. And some, like the queen, saw the love of compassion modeled by Jesus and the Buddha and Krishna and all good people who have ever lived. Walking among the woods today, you will notice that few fir trees are perfect. Among their branches, you will see nests of birds and small mammals. You will see their tips nibbled by hungry deer, branches broken at the base, and small bits of bark torn away by hungry animals. For as have many of us, the trees have learned that the scars suffered for the sake of others make us more beautiful in the eyes of the universe. For by these wounds, we attain greater wholeness.
Thank you, Kay. And thank you to Becca and Thea for sharing with us and the children some of your holiday traditions surrounding Hanukkah. These traditions are so important in rooting us to the past, to connecting us with family, tradition, and creating just a bit more light during this darkest time of the year. This morning, I'd like to share with you a tradition that has always been important to me, my family. It's our tradition to put up a Christmas tree on the weekend following Thanksgiving. You know, every year, Scrooge that I am sometimes, I find myself secretly grumbling under my breath about how much work it'll be. You know, buying a tree that it's more and more expensive every year, bringing down those countless boxes of ornaments from storage, about stringing up miles and miles of lights outside of our house, knowing in just a little over a month, it'll be time to take it all down, drag that dried up, brittle carcass of a tree out to the curb and clean up all of those pine needles. But somehow, once we get started, We begin opening the boxes of ornaments that we have saved over our lifetimes. My spirits start to lift. I remember why we are doing this. I see my daughters' faces light up, thinking about all of those memories, rediscovering all of those decorations that they made over the years. And then, of course, someone inevitably turns on Alvin and the Chipmunks and their Christmas album. Before I know it, I'm smiling and singing along. You know, our Christmas tree is never elegant like those you might see pictured in stylish magazines. It isn't carefully designed and color coordinated like those in stores at this time of year. Instead, it looks a bit like a tree that has evolved over the years. Pretty rough. You know, still wrapped with strings of lights that should have been tossed out years ago. Some of the lights work, many don't. Covered with hundreds and hundreds of ornaments we've made or received as gifts, each with its own unique story. And always, once the tree is decorated, I sit in the room on the couch, darkened except for the lights of the tree. I remember so many memories from my childhood. I remember how messy I'd get as a young child, gluing cotton balls and sequins onto felt backing to make camels and donkeys and long-tailed mice for the Christmas tree. I remember just how frustrated I would get when I couldn't hold the brush steady enough to prevent smudging as I painted faces on those camels and wise men. I remember my mom sitting in a circle of friends making tiny wreaths and crocheted stockings and needlepoint stars that they would then, a few weeks later, sell to each other at the church fair. I remember the friend who made the angel that adorned the top of our tree for years. I remember those times when my grandparents were around to help us decorate, when my sister and I were still too small to reach the top branches. And most of all, I just remember the magic and the squeals of delight each year as we opened those boxes of ornaments, as if they had arrived on the backs of those camels of long ago, contained the greatest treasures ever. There in that darkened room, I remember when we would occasionally travel to the frozen tundra of northern Minnesota to be with our family for Christmas. All of my aunts and uncles and cousins would be there. My grandma and grandpa, of course. There would always be plenty of traditional German cookies and pastries. I can remember in my mind these double doors that led into their living room. It would always be tightly closed during this gathering until that magical moment when they would open them to reveal a tree. Perfect tree covered with those little bubbly lights, the ones that looked like flickering candles. What I most remember about this time is all of the laughter and love and all of the stories handed down from generations. I remember hearing about my great-grandmother who grew up in a German village where tradition says that was where the first fir trees were brought inside at Christmas time and decorated with these little lighted candles. It was from that very village, the village of my great-grandmother, that the custom of the Christmas tree spread and eventually was brought to America over 175 years ago by the Reverend Charles Fallon, a German immigrant and a Unitarian minister. The church he served is still in Lexington, Massachusetts, now a UU congregation called the Fallen Church. By bringing a tree into their homes and centering their celebration of Christmas around this tree, my German ancestors were carrying on a much, much older tradition of making the tree a religious object. For the Norse had worshipped sacred trees long before the birth of Jesus. The Norse believed that the whole world relied on its existence to a huge tree called the world tree. And if the world tree died, they believed, the world would end. They gave this tree a wonderful name, Yggdrasil. Its branches were believed to go all the way up to the heavens, and its roots went all the way down through the earth to the underworld. The tree had to be kept alive by an occasional sacrifice of a god, such as Odin. And in one of these old Norse poems, we find this passage, a passage that's very reminiscent of the story of the death of Jesus. This old Norse poem speaks of images that still hold a lot of relevance. It says, "I know I hung for 9 nights on a tree, blown by the wind and wounded with a spear, a sacrifice to Odin, I myself was offered to myself upon that tree, the roots of which no one can ever tell." The Christmas tree is a modern descendant of Yggdrasil, the Old Norse world tree. Just think of it. In our own homes, a world tree, this symbol of all that is sacred and essential for life. But the Norse and the Germans and those of us in New England are not unique. Many religions and many times and places have made the tree into a sacred object. And the meaning of the tree in all of these religions is similar, that the tree is the center of the world. In divinity school, we were taught a Latin phrase for this. It's called the axis mundi, the axis or the center line of the universe. The tree symbolizes a place where there is this bridge between heaven and earth, between the divine and the human. In traditional language, this is the place where the gods may speak to human beings and human beings may speak to the gods. And you may recall in some of the biblical New Testament writings, it said that when Jesus was executed, he was hung from a tree. This ties the story back to the world tree and the sacrifice of Odin. Those New Testament writers, by using this as a symbol, are saying that where Jesus Christ died became the axis mundi, the center of the world. The place of his death, indeed, his death itself became a way for God to speak to humans and for humans to speak to God. The place of his death became a bridge between heaven and earth, between the divine and the human. The place of his death became a place of life. This tree that we decorate in connection with the celebration of the birth of Jesus is also connected with the death of Jesus. Just as birth, life, and death are connected in all of us, in all of our families. Connected in turn with things that don't die. Those things like creativity, of love, truth, justice, the stream of life that stretches on long beyond our individual lives. Many of us are facing a holiday season that is often less than merry. For some of us, it's a sad time, a time when things that trouble us are carved in high relief. Some of us are remembering loved ones who are long gone, or scattered across the country, or have just disappeared from our lives for one reason or another. Some of us are in conflict with a husband, or a wife, or a partner. Some of us are worried about losing our jobs, and others have already lost theirs and worry about finding another one. Some of us are worrying about our aging parents, and others a troubled child. Some of us are grieving the death of a loved one. Some of us worry about our health, and some of us just feel like everything is unraveling as the holidays approach. and all of the stress of the holidays just aren't helping. You know, perhaps it's helpful to remember that the decorated fir tree, the world tree, stands for our whole story, not just part of it. It stands for the miracle of birth, of joyful and hopeful life, and also for dying, and for the rebirth of meaning and of goodness. Perhaps it's helpful to remember that our lives are no more perfect than those fir trees standing in the forest, as we heard about in the story this morning. Their branches bent by the nests of birds and small animals. Their tips have been nibbled by hungry deer. Their branches broken at the base and small bits of bark torn away by hungry animals. And yet, if you remember in the story, it was in the chosen tree's imperfection, in its gnarled and misshapen branches, that the people were able to see the loving arms of a father and the cradling arms of a mother and the many arms of family and friends outstretched. And some saw in that imperfect but chosen tree the love of compassion modeled by Jesus and the Buddha, Krishna, and all the good people who ever lived. And it was around that tree, no longer perfect, that wounded tree, that tree filled with love and compassion, that the people danced and sang and declared that it was the most beautiful tree ever chosen. It is in our imperfections and in our woundedness that our true beauty shines through. Now I'd invite forward Don Rolfe to introduce the offering.
Well, we've celebrated today many stories of renewal, tradition, sustaining history, and in that same spirit, we hope you'll be generous with the offering to help renew, maintain the tradition, and sustain this church.
Please rise in body or in spirit for our closing hymn, Now Light is Less, number 54 in our gray hymn. And as we have done for the last month, we will conclude our service outdoors by adding additional stones to our Gun Tragedies Memorial Stones Labyrinth. Tragically, there have been more mass shootings since we last gathered last week. So when the recessional music begins, I would invite you to take one of the stones from the back table and recess outside to the labyrinth. You'll notice that some of the stones that currently make up the labyrinth are blank. I would ask you to carefully remove one of the blank stones and replace it with one that you're carrying. I would invite you to walk the labyrinth and reflect on all of those who have been injured or killed in mass shootings in this year, 2023.